So, what is Beat Dyscalculia? Many years ago, I was a member of a team who wrote a book called Beat Dyslexia, which is a multisensory literacy program. And then people were saying, well, where's the maths version of Beat Dyslexia? And so this is my attempt at creating something that helps children who are struggling with learning numbers. Going back to the very beginning and introducing numbers in a multisensory way. If I were to ask you what you have noticed in your years of teaching are the main stumbling blocks for children who have problems with maths, what would you say? What are the classic things that stand out? None of them can do that.
They may know that it's a number 5, a number 4. They can recognise the actual number symbols, but it's an understanding that the number 5 means 5 objects. Right. Or 4 objects. It's that concept of understanding, yes. The value, really.
Yes. So the 5-ness of 5.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
Vocabulary as well.
The language. That's key, isn't it? Because a lot of people don't realise that maths is a language.
Yes.
And so the language, all the vocabulary that goes with the different processes. Anything else?
Number bonds and retaining those so they can use and apply them. Memorisation, so that's number bonds and also multiplication tables, isn't it? Yes.
Anything else?
I think it is it's the using. It's once they've understood, like we go back to the 5-ness of 5, it's then knowing how to use that in other areas of maths, in making the links. That they know 5, how can they use that number and how can they use that concept and linking it to other areas within the maths and in other areas of problem solving.
Okay, neither of you have mentioned place value, but place value is one of the key things, isn't it? Because that's the absolute basics of how our number system works. So place value and also understanding the 4 processes of number. Those seem to be the classic things that people struggle with. So why, we can ask ourselves, why is it that they get to this point where they're struggling? It could be that they are slow learners and they haven't got a great IQ. It could be that they've had poor teaching over the years. But it could also be that they've got specific learning difficulties, which is a different area. And because my background is in dyslexia, I've looked quite closely at the sort of specific learning difficulties that might impact on their ability to learn numbers. So if you look at the problems that dyslexics have, the first thing is that they struggle to organize and sequence. So you get lots of organizing and sequencing in number situations. The working memory problems, which are tied up with what you said earlier about memorization, but it's if you're learning something, you're operating your working memory, which has to remember things while you're doing something else. You know, what are you holding in your memory while you're doing an operation of number or something? Directionality for dyslexics is the classic thing. They always say they struggle with left and right, but in maths, there are lots of different directions. If you look at a number line, the numbers get bigger from left to right. If you look at the place value system, the numbers get bigger from right to left, units, tens, hundreds. So they've always got a challenge in terms of directionality. Copying is very difficult for some children. And you seem to, I've heard over the years people saying, oh, well, they can't even copy. But actually copying requires a good span of focus. It requires memory. The copying can be really difficult. So we need to be aware of that. Orientation is difficult for dyslexics. Which way round does the thing go? They have this sort of super ability to see things from every perspective, but that can be confusing when you don't know whether the M is an M or a W, So orientation is very difficult. And the whole memory thing impacts things like learning multiplication tables, because if you think about learning multiplication tables, you're actually keeping 3 sequences in your memory, in your working memory at the same time. So if you're chanting, that is. So you'll be saying 1, 3 is 3. Then you're thinking, what was that on? 2, what was the times table? 2 3s are 6, and then you want to say 7, but it's actually 3. You know, that's difficult in terms of the whole sequencing thing for multiplication tables. And the other thing is that these children struggle with performing consistently. So they have inconsistent performance, and that's a genuine learning difficulty. But from a teacher's perspective, that can be interpreted as just bad behavior, you know, because they may know the answer one day and may well not know it the next day. So how do I think beat dyscalculia helps them with this? Well, the first thing that is widely recognised is that whether we're saying that they are slow learners, whether they're dyslexic, whether they've got something called dyscalculia, and that's another whole area for discussion, because is that the upper end of the dyslexia continuum or the dyslexia of maths? The actual findings are that it's not. It's about a separate area of the brain, but that would be another whole presentation. So whether it's dyscalculia, whether it's the dyslexia of maths, the solution is multisensory teaching, because you have to go back to thinking, how does the brain work? How do we learn things? We learn by experiencing them, really. If you watch a baby learn, you'll see that they bang things, they taste them, they shake them, you know. Yes. So it has to be multisensory. But the key thing with children who failed is that it needs to be really structured, very, very small steps. Otherwise, they keep on being put back in a place where they don't understand. So it's that thing about making it cumulative, but in very small steps with lots of repetition, and that's what I've tried to do. So this program embodies lots of hands-on, have a look at it, what do you think, lots of opportunities for talk skills, feeding back, and so you can assess where the child is, where their understanding is. So the whole thing is about a discovery method. What would happen if we put those two together, you know, so that they're thinking, because the challenge for teachers, especially if you're trying to keep up with a scheme and you've got to deliver this by such and such a date and then they're going to be SATs or whatever, it's that they don't give the children enough time to work it out for themselves, you know, and then that's how you understand. The other thing which is crucial is that it has to be the just right challenge. I love that terminology. The just right challenge is, I heard about, first of all, from an occupational therapist who was working with children who had been adopted from Romania, and they'd been in cots till they were 4 years old, and so it was her job to teach them to crawl, to give them all those neurological skills that they hadn't developed. And you know, she found out that if you don't give the child the just right challenge, then they give up. Yes. So that is such a key skill for teachers, to be making sure that each child is, if you give a bright child something to do that's beneath their intelligence, they feel patronised and they don't want to do it. If you give a struggling child something that's just too hard, they're back in square one and they want to go home. So the just right challenge is huge. The other thing that I think we've lost track of in teaching is the whole drilling of facts. When I was at school, you learnt your multiplication tables because you did them every single day, and you know, rote learning, on and on and on. But if it's not fun to do, if they're not engaged with that drilling process, then they're not going to want to do it. So drilling is key, and so this program embodies a lot of drill, but it's with different experiences. So really what it is over-teaching, because that's the only way you're going to get it in, but in such a way that they don't realise they're being over-taught, because they're not getting bored by doing the same thing again and again. So it's presenting all the materials, all the facts and the things that they have to learn in as many different ways as we can. And so what that adds up to is, if they can't learn the way you teach, then can you teach the way they learn? That's the key, and that Harry Chasty taught me that when I did my dyslexia training all those years ago. So why do I think Beat Dyscalculia will work? Because it's highly structured, as I've been saying, it's multisensory, it's cumulative, it provides all that repetition, it gives them opportunities to test themselves as well, which I think is key, because they have to take responsibility for their learning. When they're happy to see that today I got 5 and yesterday I only got 3, then that's progress, isn't it? So self-testing, and then also a lot of opportunities for them to talk back and to teach each other, Because, you know, they say that you remember a so-and-so % of what you hear, you remember a little bit more of what you see and hear, you remember a lot more of what you do, but you remember 90% of what you actually teach. So for them to have a teaching opportunity is also really good. And then we use a lot of links. The brain works through linking. So the whole system is contains links. So what are the links? Well, we use colour. There's a different colour for every number. We use, obviously, shapes and lots of tracing, and so it's being able to do the seeing and hearing and listening and writing and all of that. We use music. There's a song for every number.
3 cheeky monkeys swinging through the trees. See them swing from branch to branch on their bendy knees.
We use a poem for every number. In terms of learning, we do lots of rhyming because that helps them to memorize. And then there are all sorts of games that they can play, because that's another one of these drilling opportunities. So hearing, seeing, saying, doing, involving all the senses.